Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Friday Night 66 Open meeting. I am Mark Foster. I'm here with Jay Foster, Alex, Josh, Pat, possibly Emily, and Chris. We're all here now to discuss magic of convenience. So a few weeks ago we talked about little lesser uses of magic, handy little things which would be convenient rather than the big fireball hurling stuff. So we had some ideas, and this week we're going to try and get a bit crunchy, go into the numbers game of it and how it all fits together and implement it all in our system. So that's our plan for the week, so going to start off by handing over to Alex to do some check-ins.
Okay. Check-ins, I'll start with me and then I'll go left to right from my screen. So my check-ins this week, work's been a bit busy. We keep having management AWOL, which is a little annoying. But I have been working more on the design document for 66 Galaxy and just sort of filling the blanks for that and sort of passing up a few things. So from me, I will hand over to Chris to start his check-in.
Yes, very mixed week. Bad in the way I've lost a lot of time for various reasons, but good because I have a big wad of books which arrived today. Actually, yesterday I think it was. Which are the final proofs of all the books. So they're all looking good. Well, having looked at them, I've immediately gone, oh, I want to change that. I want to change that. I want to change that. But that's just me nitpicking. But they are good, so we're going to ship. So hopefully shipping will start tomorrow, Sunday. So yeah, fulfilling the Kickstarter at long last. Hooray!
And Patrick, what have you been up to this week?
There's nothing really notable I can think of. I've gotten some colour specs back for my my comic. Did a bit more of the 66 writing, and I went out last night to say farewell to one of my friends who's leaving Derby. So that was about it, really. Not the best week.
All right, and Jay, what have you been mostly up to this week?
This week, I've been mostly moving house. I pretty much have emptied everything I own into boxes, and now my very small room in the house share I'm in, well, not small room in a house share I'm in, is full of boxes. There's about enough room for me to walk between desk and bed. So mostly I need to do an awful lot of sorting. The highlight of interest of my week is last night I dropped my keys beside my car. This morning, that's where I found them. So thankfully I live in a quiet part of Oxford apparently, otherwise I would have had neither card nor keys.
With Jay living in Fort Vox, what are you up to, Josh?
Work. You know, last week when I said I shouldn't say it'd get any busier, it did. More people were off, more work coming in, nothing new there. Otherwise, I've been throwing ideas at Alex, and Alex has been throwing ideas back. And we found out the actual amount of words and pages into our current design document is mind-blowing to say. Wow. Yeah, my brain's been frazzled by that as well.
Isn't bad things we're barely a quarter done or whatever. Barely started, to be honest. Mark, what have you been doing this week?
Work, really. Work, and more work. It's been very busy. Stuff's been going not enormously well, so it's all a lot of firefighting. And I'm going to be in this weekend as well, tidying stuff up for Monday, because we had some products recalled, and thus we need to get those fixed and sent back again on Monday. It's going to be great. But otherwise, Helena's going good.
I think I did unmute her, but right, that's the check-ins done. So I will pass this over to Chris so we can go on with the magic of convenience advantages.
Thank you, Alex. Yes, so as Mark introduced us, we talked about the magic of convenience, useful spells rather than big blowing up sort of spells, sort of things which a real society would have. A real magical society will want these sorts of spells because they make life easier or better. And we talked about lots of ideas over previous weeks, and what we're going to do this week is actually a bit more crunch. We're going to get into the details of the 66 role-playing system and actually try and take some of these ideas and put them in advantages. Advantages are like the core bits of the system. It's how you build up actions. But unlike, say, a game like Pathfinder, where you have a spell, it describes exactly what that spell does, and it just sort of like stands alone, everything in the 66 is sort of mixes together, so you can combine different advantages. So you have to factor that in how you write the magic, because that's how you make magic more powerful. And some magic spells are easier to do than others. So we're going to talk through a bunch of spells and work out how to do them, basically. So we're going to start off with a spell with Jay, who has picked a spell called Grow, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Jay, would you like to tell us about Grow and your thoughts on how we implement this into the system?
I will indeed, Chris, since you have invited me to do so. Grow is exactly that, growing. Now, one of the key things we want to talk about in terms of advantage in these is that a spell is essentially an advantage that lets you do something that physically or normally would be near impossible for your character to do, because the rules of physics, the rules of the world you're in, simply don't let you do it. So, example, this one, Grow, lets you essentially point your magic wand, point your magic fingers, point your ritual at anything. Now, I'm going to throw it open at this point. Anything you want, you can increase the size of. Now, we're originally thinking about it in terms of a food mage. So, obviously, we're going to put it on the Nutrimancer. I think we always need to focus it down a bit. So, the text initially, what I was thinking would be in the lines of increase the size of or productivity of crops or food. So I definitely need to get some feedback on how we're going to phrase that, because it's going to be the definition of that can really play around with what things are going to happen. Now, is this something where we just pointed at a seedling and it grows? Are we simply looking at the magic effect? How much does it grow? So the effect you want to do this. I mean, do we want to qualify the effect? Keywords wise, I'm mostly expecting it to be a static. I'm not expecting this is. Yeah, I'm going to call this a static because I don't think it's something you'll do in combat a lot. Primarily, here's a keyword we need to discuss with Chris. Do we have one keyword in Tixis Magic for describing something that always requires concentration to cast?
Oh, that's a good question. The answer, straightforward answer is no, we don't. And in some respects, I would not want to do that, because what's happening in reality, if you're saying someone must concentrate, is basically you're saying someone must spend 2 potential on this advantage to activate it. And I think there's more elegant ways of managing its power level and restricting it than that. So the way I'd want to think about that is the plus keyword. So you can have skill plus or a particular advantage like brawn plus. And what that means is that when you play, say, Grow, you have to play that other advantage in the same action or take a penalty. And in that way, you have almost the same effect as forcing someone to concentrate, because they've got to spend more potential on another advantage. So they end up spending the same amount of potential, but it brings them more to the game because they're playing 2 different advantages, so they're feeling they're getting more out of the character, and it encourages synergy within the actions.
Yeah. To qualify on that, Chris, when I say concentrate, I mistook there, because obviously to concentrate has a specific thing on this. You've got a quick, Alex?
So if you want to think of doing like a synergy of using 2 different advantages, why not have if it's something you want to use as a combat skill, you have to spend points for the combat casting advantage, which would allow you to be able to do it quicker and as a reaction, as opposed to having to concentrate and make it all work.
Yeah,
that's interesting, because I think I know what you're getting at, Jay. In sort of like you want the person who's casting it to commit to using the spell for a period of time or its things. So one way of doing it would be playing with the time keyword. You can specify how long something takes to cast. So time scene would mean it takes a whole scene to cast. And then playing on Alex's idea, you could possibly have an advantage which generally always reduces the time category by 1. So a spell which normally would take a scene now only takes a round, but without the penalty.
That sounded interesting. The other thought I had, Chris, is do we have anything on a keyword that automatically makes something a complex action?
What do you mean by complex?
In that if I wanted to grow this plant from a seed to a full wheat stalk, that it would be a complex action that I would basically have to spend time casting it.
Yes, the time keyword, exactly that. So if you put time bracket scene, it means you have to spend the entire scene taking the action, and you can then speed it up or slowing it down by taking penalties.
Okay. So is there any? I'm going to throw it open to anyone else. Is it worthwhile? I mean, all right, to define for the audience, a complex action in 66 is one where you have to roll multiple times to get the result you want, rather than roll once. Do we think that's going to be of interest to someone trying to do a grow, or not?
My thoughts is that as a game designer, you always have to think about what are you getting the players to do, what's their enjoyment coming from the situation. Alex?
I think maybe for a speed thing, if you have each instance or each cast of grow will make it change by a particular step, and then if you want to get it more, you have to do it, more times and put more into it to make it into a bigger step. So if you decide I want to grow it, 3 times the size, you have to do in one block. You have to succeed that 3 times for that to happen.
Yeah, the degree of success would basically the degree of success would determine how many life stages you push the plant through.
Yes, you can play some interesting things with the way we do handle time, in that we have actions, rounds, scenes, mornings, etc. And saying, well, how far does the character want to accelerate the growth of this item? And it's, if they want to take it up to years, the resistance to that is quite considerable, but if they only want to speed it up by a day, it's obviously a lot easier. So we could do some interesting things like along those lines.
I run it like a bit like a recovery card. You bid for what you're going to try to achieve.
Yes, that exactly like that. Yes, that's a very good analogy. That's not an analogy; it's an exact description. So yeah, so
in that case, to summarise what I've got for grow, it's a spell allows you to increase the age of any plant. It's a static. It carries the time seen, and the degree of success determines the amount of the ages of the plant that are accelerated. We'd have to probably work quite carefully on making sure the text was condensed enough to cover basically getting the recovery rules in shorthand on it as well, basically saying if you want to get it 2 stages of its life, you have to bid for 2d6. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with what we've got for grow there.
Brilliant. Okay, so that's grow. Let's have Pat. Equilibrium dampening. What's that about, and how do you think it's going to work?
Right, equilibrium dampening was one I thought of, which is a kind of travel power, which is designed to basically render inert the effects of travelling. So the kind of shakiness you get from a cart, maybe the kind of saddle sore you get from riding for a long time, or like travel sickness, things like that. So I'd say it would have to have the opportunity keyword, because you couldn't really dampen equilibrium if there wasn't any equilibrium to dampen. First of all, I did actually think it might have a kind of a strange combat use, which is if somebody's charging at you, they've got a lot of inertia, and you cast it on them. Obviously, they will still have the same inertia, but it might play with their head because suddenly they don't feel like they're moving as fast or something like that. They might overcompensate or,
Yeah, I mean, the original idea behind this was to stop you getting travel sickness, wasn't it?
It was a spell that I want. That's what it was.
Yeah. So the sort of like the sort of, as a designer, you'd have to think, how is this going to fit into the setting? And do you want it to be quite specific, as in, it's a spell which basically stops you getting travel sickness, or do you want it to be more general and leave it a lot more open to how the players can use it? Because you design it in different ways depending on what you actually want to achieve within the game.
Well, it's the effect of the spell is it dampens equilibrium, so it's used to things like travel sickness and that, but it's not a spell which is specifically designed to that. So if you could think of a use for it where dampening, slowing or reducing the equilibrium of something would have some kind of positive in-game effect, then by all means, feel free to use it.
So I'm just a little bit confused about. Oh, sorry, Jay, you want to jump in? Mute.
Yeah, I got it. Because essentially you talk about inertial dampening, you could quite rapidly just wave that in front of you and stop an arrow in flight.
Yeah, I guess you could.
Yeah. So one thing, what I was about to say is that, exactly what do you mean by equilibrium beam damping? So you're talking about taking inertia out of the system, or
no, it doesn't prevent the movement of something. It just prevents the effects of that equilibrium on objects. So I suppose you could cast it on an arrow, and theoretically, even though the arrow would still be traveling at the same speed, it wouldn't transfer its kinetic energy when it hits, and it would just sort of stop.
Yeah, Alex.
So would it not be things like it would prevent any additional forces that we're acting upon it? So the arrow is still inertia, still flying forward, but when this spell is cast on it, wind is no longer a factor.
Yeah, so
it's not dampening the inertia, it's just dampening anything that would deviate it from its current straight line course. Same with if you're in a carriage and it's jogging around, you cast it, and it's not stopping the carriage, but it's stopping any extra force bumping it around. Magical suspension for your carriage.
Yeah, this one's tricky because I think the hard part of this is because each advantage is limited to 45 words or something like that. I think it works out at normally. Actually explaining what you mean the advantage to do is going to be tricky. I mean, this is where getting the title right is always vital on a 66 advantage, because if you called it something like anti-travel sickness, then you pretty much explained everything player needs in the title. I think this one, is going to be very much about exactly what do you mean, what exactly is the game effect, and it would, I think, require quite a lot of tweaking on the description, but the keywords themselves would be really simple.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where you need to be very clear what it is without kind of having to use too many. Yeah, exactly what you said.
Okay, let's move on. And Josh, the right path.
The right path, indeed. I'm very in a bit of a debate about whether having it to be either a life or static card. I feel if it's going for the traveling wizard, it's going to be some part of him. Best description is the player always knows the right way to a destination. Doesn't necessarily point the way, but if there are two paths, you know which is the right path. Which I believe is going to use the opportunity keyword, because it has to be at that point. You can't use it all the time. You can't just be going down a straight path and say, I need to find the right path. Because in theory, you should be already going down the right path. This is if you come to a crossroads, you got point A, B, or C. You'll use it and you go, which one is it? You'll find that you'll get the hint that it's C, so you then tend to go left.
Yeah, I mean, that's worth touching on the opportunity keyword here, because I think it got mentioned earlier, didn't it, in the grow or something like that when we were talking about that. Paths and the equilibrium. The opportunity card is really a combat thing, as in very specific circumstances in combat triggers it. If you think about, you can't use this spell when there isn't a choice of paths. Well, that's the same as you can't use a sword when there's nothing to stab. The nature of the game, the narrative of the game, says when an action is is doable or not, and that's the thing about 66 is that about finding interesting ways of using advantages at times people hadn't anticipated. So you don't need the opportunity keyword. The description you've got: player always knows the right way to a destination. Doesn't point the way, but if you know there are two paths, you know which is the right path. So if you're lost on the moorland where there are no paths, is there an infinite number of paths and it shows you the right one, or does it just not work?
It's probably wouldn't work. It's more of a decision-making one. if you've got two paths, you know which one's the right one. It doesn't help if you're lost in an area with no clear paths or boundaries.
Are we thinking here about Gandalf in The Mines of Moria, where he sits for half an hour working out which way to go? Yeah.
Yeah.
Alex, have you got some thoughts on this?
Just saying, would this be a useful one to with you into some kind of labyrinth or maze?
Yeah. So, yeah, that definitely that'd be a brilliant one for May. So I think you need to in the description you need to make clear that where there are multiple defined paths, roads, or whatever else, it allows you to choose between those. It guides the player on to which one. Jay, some thoughts?
Yeah, I was thinking of referencing Gandalf there. Perhaps it could do with a quite a long time on it. So you could ditch the static and just put time scene on it, so that you get the impression that if you really want to get stuck in on this, you basically sit there and go, that way.
Yes, that's right. And Josh, sorry, Alex, you thoughts about that as well?
Yeah, so comment on that. Maybe it's if it's you want variables. If you've got the distance affects the time it takes for the spell. So it's not your destination is not far away. You've just got this in the way. It's a quicker one. But if your destination is quite far, it's going to take multiple more right, left decisions on the path. It takes quite a while to generate which of these is actually the right one to take.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah,
It takes your magical sat nav a while to plot the route.
Yeah, that would be an interesting twist. Either limiting it to say that the destination has to be within a certain distance, or that saying, yeah, the distance away from the destination is going to drive the casting time. Pat?
Yeah, I get the idea of giving it a time keyword in terms of like game balance and things like that, but from a kind of fiction or fluff point of view, it might actually be less convenient to have a magic spell which takes you the kind of time it would take you to have a look up each passageway. I'm just thinking, if you've got two passages, you can always head up one for a little bit and go, no, this isn't the right way. And if it takes more time to cast the spell than that, then is there a need for it, is what I'm thinking.
That's true. We're thinking about an outdoors where journeys take some distance. Where you are, if you're doing a dungeon crawl, you know there's a temple somewhere down in this complex. Then yeah, just that you want something you can drop very quickly. So yeah, that's going to be interesting thoughts. And Josh.
One small advantage that this could be used on the spell is it could be used in any light level. If you're in a completely dark setting that's got no moon, or it's covered by the clouds and you can't really see where you're going, you can then find out the way.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we'll have to think about with these advantages is what else are people going to use the advantage with, as in what other advantages combined. Now, obviously, if you've got some arcana, arcane power, wizard path type things, they're easy ones to mix in. But what if you've got like the navigation advantage or something like that? And what the player's doing is using his magic along with some of his skills to make the decision, and it all stacks up. And this is where in magic, for creating magic with specific spells in the 66, it becomes tricky because you run the danger of making it a very limited spell, which just does its own thing, and it doesn't make sense to include things like navigation. Whereas sort of design principle of the 66 is that we want people to go, well, based on the weather, the stars, and what my magic is telling me, I think we should go this way. Because that's more character building. He's calling in all the character's experience, knowledge, and advantages to make a decision or to be able to do something. Maybe the wording wants to be something like the character instinctively knows which of the defined paths, what sort of clearly defined paths or roads he wants to follow to reach his destination. And that leaves it open enough that when you say, well, it makes sense, I can use my navigation with that, but without leaving it open, which is like, it is a magical sat nav which takes you to the treasure straight away. Okay, I think that was interesting. Alex, you've got some final thoughts?
Yeah, just say to us, if you're working on sort of distance time, sort of corroboration, being in a dungeon and saying, well, I'm at this dungeon, I want to find the temple in this dungeon, that spell shouldn't actually take too long to cast because of the relative distance you're going to be going. So you're at one, edge of the dungeon and say, I want to find nearest treasure source. Which of these takes me to the treasure quickest? Because it's not going to be that far, so the distance time thing is going to work out. It won't take too long to cast it. It's more kind of, here's a fork in the road. Which fork will get me to the city I'm going to far away? It's where it takes longer to pass out.
Yeah, there's something like a couple of times we've touched on this idea of sort of like time, distance, or whatever being, or time, amount of growth being sort of combined. And this might be one of those places where actually we need a new keyword. A lot of it comes down to how crunchy you want to make your setting. If you want to take it more sort of a Pathfinder things, you put in more crunchiness, more keywords, and more things. But by making it a keyword, we can have a section which explains the rules, which is, I don't know, scale relative to time or something like that. And just in the appendix, we explain what this keyword means. It means that if you want to take it further, you need to increase the time, or vice versa. And then you don't have to explain that on the advantages. You just drop that keyword on, and instantly you've introduced a new mechanic, a new set of rules into the game. So that's the sort of situation when you want to have a new keyword, where there's a relatively complicated mechanic you need to explain, which you want to use multiple times. You convert it into a keyword, and then it becomes shorthand and put it on to the advantage. Okay, let's move on. Mark. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that because I'll only ruin it.
Pelamancy, I think is the one you're after. So this one, I had a quick think about this one. It's interesting. It's quite an easy one to turn into something quite big rather than just a handy little convenient bit of magic. So what I was thinking about this one was essentially it's the magic of clothing. So summoning or manipulating clothing. So there's two kind of major ways of using it. From a convenience sense, you can be really lazy and always have your repellemancy on. Therefore, you never actually have to get dressed yourself. You just trundle around the place and the right clothes appear on you, or the clothes you have morph into being the right way. So you're actually wearing your pajamas, but you're in a white tie dinner. It's all fine. So that's one way of doing it. The other thought was socialites. So no matter what situation you're in, you're always wearing the right clothing. Wander into the goth club, look like a goth. Wander into black tie dinner, be wearing the right cocktail dress. That kind of thing struck me as quite handy. So that's very passive uses of it. Thinking about more kind of active uses, I was thinking you could use it for example, like immediate offensive action, so causing wardrobe malfunctions in people. There's a question of how direct that is, whether you kind of have to wave your hands and go, and then their bra falls off, or you wave your hands on and then sauce lands on their shirt, or something, I don't know, or whether things just happen wrong to people when you've done this magic against them. I think that's kind of an open question. But the other thought, you could say easy cause wardrobe malfunctions. You could build it into rituals for forcing people to dress badly over time. Alex, so you've got a couple of points there. Do you want to hop in for a second?
Yes, on the description, is this summoning an outfit, or is this just an illusionary outfit?
I think it's summoning an outfit. If it's all about appearance, it's magic of clothing. It strikes me as summoning and manipulating actual clothes rather than creating the illusions of clothes, because you'd be a path relying on optical illusions.
Yeah.
What do you reckon, Pat?
Thinking of the scene in Frozen where she makes a dress out of the kind of snow around her. Like, maybe it would work like that, just turn things around you into clothes.
Just sounding quick, I need a suit. It should be made of carpet fluff.
Well, the atoms change into suit atoms, whatever. You know what I mean.
You just need some equivalent mass to start off with.
Yeah, exactly.
So whatever you want. I shall wear a handy boiler suit made of tarmac.
Josh?
I actually quite like the idea of putting the stuff in towards you. But Josh, what do you think? Some about disguises.
I know you've already mentioned this on the notes. They can be used to disguise yourself as, say, a castle guard or a noble person. Something which you're not necessarily. You could probably bluff your way, which I imagine is quite the way of the what do we call him in the end? The social spellcaster. I don't think we even got a name for him yet.
Yeah, I can see that working, that kind of thing. Now, one of the questions I got with all this stuff, we're talking about disguising and summoning clothing to clad yourself in and stuff like that. It's all pretty big scale stuff. It's not like summoning herbs and spices or things like that. It's quite powerful. Is this the right level of stuff we're after, or do we want to have fiddly little fun bits of magic rather than essentially what we've got here is an infinite disguise thing?
Before we go to you, Alex, I was just thinking, to answer your question, I think it's one of the things, you have to decide how it's going to work. Because say you want to make it, if you did want to make it an illusion type thing, hollow projector type clothes, so you can walk around naked and you look fully dressed, then you want something like a status effect. So you summon your outfit for a period of time. And so that would be very good. If you wanted to make it more, one of the things you've suggested is that you always dress right, you always have exactly the right one. You're more sort of like giving someone a sense of taste, because someone who, if it's just like a holographic projection, someone with bad taste in clothes would still end up dressed in bad clothes, or just holographic bad clothes. So that sort of like takes it in a different way. The other way you thought about making it work was it summons matter or summons clothes from somewhere. And that, again, is different things like, does it summon the right clothes? Does it, is it sort of random? So you end up with a physical object, and there's a lot of difference between that and, say, like the status effect version. Is the status effect has a time limit on it. It will run out at a certain point. You have to keep renewing it. Whereas if you summon a physical object, you always have that physical object. It never goes away. So they have slightly different mechanical implications about how you choose to take them. Alex?
Yeah, just sort of wondering if it would be, you can see it, spell, bam, you have it, or it has to be linked to, I have this outfit, I wish to wear it, this outfit is now on me. You have to have the clothing you want in the first place to actually sort of summon it with your Appellamans. So if you've got convenience one, to sort of link it with your wardrobe. So anything in that wardrobe you can summon with Appellamans.
Yeah, the other thing is, it's basically summon your clothes, and it doesn't matter where your clothes are, they appear to you, and you just have to think about which clothes you want. So that would be quite an interesting one, and you throw some interesting plot things, because say your clothes, arguably your armour is your clothes, someone's stolen your armour, wibble wibble spell, bang, you've got your armour back. So it sort of opens up, which path you take opens up all sort of different ideas. Sorry, go on, Mark.
I like that approach of you have to summon something which you already own. It has to exist rather than just, because it puts limits then on the actual use of the card. So you have to have the thing you want to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. Pat?
I was just going to say, if you can only summon something you own, you can't use it to basically get yourself better armor. But I was thinking maybe you don't, because a cool game effect would be if you use it to, say, get a uniform for a disguise, and you've got a certain amount of time before that disappears, and you're left standing in your knickers in the middle of an enemy barracks or something. Would add a level of tension to a game.
Yeah, that would be very much, you use the status effect technique for that. So that it summons it by default. It'd be for a scene, and resistance gets more if you want to have it for a morning or a day or whatever else. Alex?
Yeah, the thing, maybe if you want stuff, if you're doing some of the things you have, perhaps have it that you have a link spell. So basically you attach your magic name tag to a piece of clothing, and then you can summon it. So if you want to steal a uniform, you can sneak up and sort of put this tag spell on it. Then you can summon that particular uniform.
Oh yeah, sort of like a name tag in school. Yeah, that's what. Yeah, if you put a magic signal on there. Mark, you had some thought on time?
Yeah, just a point you made about the time limit on there for like a scene or a day, that kind of thing.
A uniform for a day that you would sum it for a day, and the resistance against that would be 46 extra on top of whatever else. But yeah, at the end of that period, however you choose to define it, and we don't define those time periods exactly, it will disappear. So it's up to the GM, the group, to decide, well, I summon it, I dress into it, I walk into the it's a new scene. I mean, that would be a bit of an arsehole thing for a GM to do.
Makes it very arbitrary on the GM's decision there, rather than having a handy rule of you summon it with the intention of a scene. And when you try and use it longer than that, then you start getting resistances.
Yeah, we don't have...
So the resistance dice are then applied when you start trying to use it, rather than when it's created. Because otherwise, if it's when it's created, then you know precisely how long it's going to exist.
Yeah, I mean, some of this comes down to GMing style and game style, and we very much encourage as a game people to be sensible and reasonable, so the GM doesn't act like a dickhead. The players cast a spell using their advantages. They should get something out of that. It should be enough to get them into the castle or whatever else. I mean, that's what I would call the scene, is whatever the players intended it. And then you have some funny about sort of maintaining it. I would say is they just have to keep recasting the spell. And that, they know when it's going to end. They've got to recast the spell, and that sort of carries it on.
Yeah.
That you can recast that while you're still flying and carry on.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. Right. Ooh, we're doing pretty good for time. Squeeze in Alex, because I like this one. Alex, what's your magic?
Yeah. So looking through, I thought quickly grab the alphabetize spell. Just on the side note, we're going to put if you've got like opportunity or time as a objective, maybe for these skills all have spell as just a word tagged onto those, just to make sure you people know. So yeah, I've wrote on here, it's rearrange the targeted objects into a neat line organized in accordance with the alphabet.
Yeah. This one, the key thing about game balance here is getting the phrasing right about what it can actually affect. Because we talked about rearranging people's organs and doing really unpleasant things. If you've got three guards...
That's kind of why I kept it vague, because I didn't know if that was a kosher thing to be doing or not.
Well, that's the sort of things to think about. Generally speaking, when we're talking about an action within 66, you're talking about affecting one man-sized person, 1 5-foot square sort of size, and that's sort of like the baseline. So if you wanted a spell which could rearrange guards, you've got a whole army standing in front of you, you want to rearrange them all into alphabetical order for whatever reason, you'd need the area keyword and quite a large one to encompass all the things. If you so to make it more reasonable, to actually where we started with filing book things, you would say, objects in a 5-foot square, and in that case, one person is an object, so you can't rearrange their internal organs. Or you might want to say objects which you can see in 1 5-foot square, and that sort of further tightens it down. So, yeah, this is sort of where thinking about exactly what you wanted to do in the game is very important, because you only have those 45 or so words. You need to understand what it is you're trying to achieve in the game before you can really write it.
Right. There's also thinking for maybe just an explanation thing of, to use this skill, you have to concentrate on the alphabet, or then the way it wants to be organized.
Yes, I mean, does we don't want to get it so you don't want to get too precise. Yeah, objects you can see in a 5-foot square which you are thinking about are alphabeticalized becomes a little bit, convoluted. So, I mean, and also things like it's a very, very specific. I mean, it's a big joke. It's an interesting one from mechanical things. But if I was really trying to sort of like introduce this into the game, because a path only has 9 advantages, you need to make each one count. I would call this something like put into order, and so make it more general and say you can, whatever you can see, you can put into order, or you instinctively know which order they go in, or something along those lines, and make it a more general skill so that they get more use out of it. Okay, I think we're up to 5 to 8, so we'd better stop there. That's great. I think did you all find that useful in terms of like thinking about how to do these sorts of magical effects and in the system, because it's not always intuitive, the problems you face. Okay, good. That's excellent. So next week, what are we going to do next week? Well, we actually had a quick discussion before we came on air, and we're going to be talking about magical cities. What do they look like? What adventures are there? Can you have in them? Things which are truly magical cities, I think we're going to say. Real, proper high fantasy cities, not one of these pseudo-medieval with a little bit of magic chucked in cities. A genuinely thing which could only exist in a fantasy world type city. And just let's see what ideas are out there. So we'll put that out on social media, and we'll knock around some ideas next week. So let's hand over to Josh for some pluses and deltas.
Pluses and deltas indeed. Though I believe Alex has something to say first.
Yeah, sort of say if you don't want it sort of medievally cities, to say something like cities affected by the magical convenience. So looking for cities where you can see this sort of convenient magic in place everywhere.
Yes, it plays into that same idea. It is about a real working magical society, and what spells and what effects, what's the knock-on effects of those spells. So good. So yes, Josh.
Pluses and deltas, please.
Okay, my plus was that I found that interesting. I don't know about the rest of you, because I like thinking about 66 mechanics. I've been doing nothing else for several years, so I found it interesting. Delta, I don't know. I think I found myself I was talking quite a lot and explaining things quite a lot, and I would have liked to see more, things coming from other people. But that might just be me.
Fair enough. How about you, Pat?
Sorry, yeah, I was a bit quiet for all that. I wasn't really my delta. I found it a bit of a. I just didn't have many ideas. And positives, yeah. Well, I like the direction some of the stuff took, which was kind of quite unexpected. I like how some things wound up with like dual uses as well, like the Pellemancer.
Wicked. What about you, Jay? Apart from your lack of cheesecake. Running joke.
Cheesecake. Cheesecake. Actual sentences, James. Pluses. Yeah, I enjoy getting into more of the detail and getting stuck into the actual hardcore mechanics of it. I think it's a nice thing to start bringing in every now and then into the think tanks as a way of advertising how the system actually works to our audience.
Cool. Mark, how about you?
I agree with James. It's good to get dirty and technical with it every now and again, and kind of get into the grit of how we actually implement all the stuff we talk about. Because it's all very well having these big ideas. It's good to actually, we then have to try and make it really work in a game that has balance and gameplay. Deltas, 2 things. I'd like to think a bit more and talk a bit more about how the system actually implements an awful lot of magical effects, and try and get more of the toolbox of the keywords, all the ways we do that, because a lot of it seems to rely entirely on status effects. I'm not quite sure if that's the best way. And one of the things I wanted to talk about, or have a think about, is whether we want to introduce the idea of summoned items. You can create an item which has a summoned keyword and therefore has a duration or limits on its use, or something along those lines. Because that works for the clothes or for magical armor or magical weapons, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, other delta, Chris was talking too much. So it's not just him.
That's harsh. So Alex, apart from wildly varying light levels, how are you?
Yeah, pluses as are interesting to go a bit further into detail these things and look at it from the sort of the mechanics perspective, and also I have dinner now, huzzah. Deltas, I'm not overly familiar with the mechanics, so I need to work more on that. So that sort of personal one is I need to understand how these all fit together a little better.
Fantastic, and I'll end with myself. Pluses, it's nice to get my hands nice and dirty with the mechanics. Nice to get a bit more of a grasp on them. Deltas, oh god, next week's going to suck at work, and because I said it earlier. And I still also need to get used to the mechanics themselves. So while I got a better grasp tonight, I still need to get a better grasp overall. So I will sign off. I'll sign off. I'm not going to sign off. I will pass over to Mark.
Okay, so that was this week's meeting. We got dirty, down and dirty with mechanics. Next week, as Chris said, we're going to have a look at magical cities. We'll be on the social media, Facebook, Reddit, Google+, a couple of others as well, once we found them. We're very interested to hear what you have to think about cities which are really run on magic. They're based on it. It's not a D&D city. Everything here is fundamentally relies on magic, and then see what we can come up with, and we can discuss those in the session. Feed some stuff back. So that will be good night from me and good night from all the rest of us, and we will see you again next week.